Good day, everyone. This is Bob Roswick at the Bismarck Air Museum, and with me today is Tom Trousdale. In our last episode, episode 6, we discussed the Vickers Viscount. And believe it or not, I have Tom on pause, so I'm going to go hit Tom's play button. So how you doing today, Tom?
Anxious to talk about the Viscount.
All right, and now we have a little picture of the cockpit, and Tom, you're telling me that you've been in one of these cockpits.
I have on 2 different occasions I got to be in a Viscount cockpit. At one time, Super Value Stores had a corporate aircraft, which was a Viscount 700. And I was lucky enough to be able to sit in that and discuss some time with the pilots. And then I got to go into a former Air Canada aircraft that was in Bismarck. And it's a very tight fitting, but the reason it's so tight fitting is it's designed for speed. It's a hot rod, whereas the American Airlines carriers were a little fatter and had more room in the cockpit. This was designed for speed. I talked to a Air Canada pilot one time, and he said, "Do you remember the Viscount cockpit?" I says, "Yeah, I do." And then he was telling me about the Vanguard cockpit, which we'll get to later on. This was the bigger series aircraft that Vickers built. He said, you could almost have a dance in the Vanguard's cockpit. It is so wide and roomy.
All right. And this is not tiny because Tom and I are rather large guys. It's tiny because it was tight, right?
It's tiny because it was tight. You better believe it.
All right, here's a little bit of boarding action. This one has both a door and an aft door.
The 4-door had the built-in air stairs. The back door did not. And again, the Americans copied the air stair idea from Britain. They had started it with the Viscount, and if you remember, American carriers, the Electra had the same thing. They had the forward door, had the air stairs, the back one just opened up. Remember the 737 or the 727? That had the air stair door too. Again, it was copied by Americans from the British.
All right, and before we go on to this picture, bring this story to life here. We had a Viscount in Bismarck for a while. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, we had a Viscount in Bismarck. I was still in college then, so we're looking at least 55, close to 60 years ago. But there was a group of people in Bismarck that started an air travel club, and they called it Holiday Air. And they bought U.S. Steel's. U.S. Steel had 3 Viscounts that they used for executive travel. They brought one of them and shipped it up to Winnipeg because Winnipeg overhauled the Air Canada Viscounts. They were all up at Winnipeg and did all the maintenance work up there, and they painted it up. It was a beautiful ship. I'd have wished I'd have had a picture of it. Of course, that was before I was taking airplane pictures. But was a beautiful airplane, and people in Bismarck would use it to go to Phoenix or Las Vegas, or it was basically a travel club aircraft that you sold memberships, and then the aircraft would go to places, and if you wanted to go long, because of your membership, you could ride, and you could ride very cheaply.
Very interesting. Tell us about the first flight. Didn't they go to Vegas and have a few issues?
That they definitely did. The first flight that they took off out of Bismarck on was a cold and stormy night, just the kind of night you wouldn't want to be flying on, but there was no problem, and of course, like it was jet powered, so they were sitting back and enjoying themselves. Unfortunately, they got as far as Dickinson, and they had a fire warning indication on one of the engines. Now, there was no flames observed, but the fire warning light meant that something is wrong. Either the engine is overheating or there is an onboard fire. So they had to feather the engine and turn around and return to Bismarck. And it took them about 3 days to get that fixed. And so the first trip, they only made it as far as Dickinson and back.
Very good. Next picture is our wind-up picture, and this is a great picture. This shows kind of a lot of aircraft of the time, although I think the Viscount, which is front and center, is probably the earliest version of this type of aircraft, but this is kind of the evolution of jets, as it were. And so what do we have here, Tom?
We've got the Viscount, the 700 series in BEA, and the interesting thing about BEA was British European Airlines. That BEA stood for BEA. British European Airlines actually hauled more people than BOAC. It was actually a better run company. I have read and talked to former pilots from BEA, and they referred to themselves as gravel girdies. In other words, they were willing to do work, and they were a hard-working crew. They said everybody from BOAC considered themselves upper crust, so to speak, and the Cambridge class of people. Well, they didn't want to get their hands wet, and they didn't want to do work. So given the choice, I'd much rather have flown with BEA crews. As you can see, it says Channel Airlines. They flew all over Britain, and they flew in all kinds of weather, and they had very, very few crashes. As a matter of fact, only 2 of them come to mind in about 40 years of flying, so they were damn good. The second one is a Scandinavian, Caravel.
Yeah.
It is a Caravel. It was built by the French. United Airlines flew Caravels. It was quite an early aircraft. The thing that is interesting here, let's go to the cockpit of the Caravel, then let's go to the cockpit of the Comet, and the Vickers sold Comet sections, the cockpit section, to the French, and the French used the ideal same Comet cockpit for building the Caravels. So when Bob said the British were ahead of the game, they really were. One of the big problems that they fell into is they listened to their airlines sometimes, and the airlines were very, very cautious in Britain. And a good example is they didn't never want to build airlines that hauled up to 100 people. They never, in their wildest dreams, thought they would haul 100 people in an airliner. And compare that today, or if you just are curious, look at the 380, the double-decked airliner today that hauls 580 people. So kind of interesting. Dana Air is a British chartered airline. They're using the Comet 4C. That was the last Comet, safe as a rug in a bug, so to speak. Built very, very well. You notice it has tip tanks on it. Very, very well. The only thing that everybody loves to joke about, take a look at the tail. You see the tail was an example of like an old DC-6. You'll notice all the jets behind it, and even the Caravel have a swept-back tail. That's one thing the British never did. They never swept back their tails. They figured that they left them straight simply because they, in their mind, figured that it flew a lot safer and you had better stability. The World Airways behind it is a DC-862, 250-passenger airplane. It's based out of Oakland, California. It's a charter outfit. Did a lot of work to hauling troops to Vietnam and so on. And then we have the last BOAC, and that is a Vickers VC-10.
Very good, Tom. Well, Bismarck Air Museum Foundation is trying to capture and restore the large round-top hangar at the Bismarck Airport, known as Hangar Number 5. Log on to our website, check it out, give us a donation to help us make it happen. Subscribe to this site on YouTube. I'd like to credit many people. We have pictures from airliners.net. We have pictures from Wikipedia. We got pictures from Bismarck Air Museum archives. And I'd like to thank Tom for helping us understand these iconic photos.
It's always a great way to spend an afternoon, Bob, and you're really doing me a favor because you're refreshing my memory. I sometimes think I'm losing it, but boy, this brings back memories, and I didn't think I had.
Thanks, Tom.